Hello everybody, this is Jeremy Siskind here. I'm the author of Jazz Piano Fundamentals. I'm the author and composer and arranger, arranger more than composer, of solo standards for piano, as well as playing solo jazz piano. You can hop on over to jeremysiskind.com, jeremysiskind.com for you listeners in Espanol out there. You're not going to understand any of the rest of this video if you are a Spanish speaker, but always glad to see Spanish speakers. Okay, so I just did a workshop yesterday, and one of the questions that I got, I realized, is a question that I have not covered on this channel, and this is definitely for a beginner. So if you're more intermediate or advanced, go do something else. Have a good time. But if you are new to jazz, if jazz is a mystery to you, if you're a classical pianist wondering how jazz players do it, this video might be more for you. So this is all about keeping the form. And this is just such a big dividing line between people who see jazz as really a mystery and people who really start to understand the rules of the game of jazz. And so first of all, let me say something that might be obvious even to you beginners, or it might not be, which is that in jazz, we always, just about always, know what we're doing. We are playing off of a lead sheet. Here's an example. This is a lead sheet, Beautiful Love. And we played the melody usually just once at the beginning, and then afterwards, the melody doesn't really come back until the very end, but we continue playing these chord changes, the harmony, exactly in order for as many beats as we played it during the melody, right? So if we start this tune, once we go to the improvisation, we're still going to be hearing these chords. Right? This is really the organizing principle of most jazz, is that once we're done playing what we call the head, the melody, we continue playing these chords in order in the same rhythm. So that we're playing E minor 7 flat 5 for 4 beats, A7 sharp 5 for 4 beats, D minor for 8 beats because it lasts for 2 bars. And then we're creating new melodies over those chords, right? Here's how those chords sounded again. I'm just doing the first 8 measures, really kind of only the first 7, although here's number 8, right? And then I'm going to make up new melodies that fit with those chords. I'll do a different demonstration. Right? Can you hear the chords are still the same as they originally were? And if you were to sing the melody in your head or out loud while I'm improvising, it should still basically fit. I don't know how well I can multitask. I'm going to try, though. This could be a disaster. I really can't sing in either register, so excuse my terrible voice. It's a terrible note for me. A is either up here or down here. Right, so in a certain sense, jazz is like a theme and variations, except in classical theme and variations, we're usually varying the melody is the interesting thing to create new versions of. Whereas in jazz, it's the harmony that we create new melodies on top of. We kind of get rid of the first melody, or sometimes we reference it. But usually it's just making totally new melodies over the harmony. Now, so that leads me to the question I got in this workshop yesterday, which is not an uncommon one, which is how do jazz musicians keep that form? How do you remember those chords in that order while you're doing all this other complicated stuff of, creating new melodies, of, playing the harmony, dealing with syncopation, listening to other members of the band. And so that's what I want to really talk about today. And so I'm going to go over here, and we're talking about keeping the form. So the form means, how many beats does each chord have, and where do we repeat, where do we continue on, all of that kind of thing. So first thing to do is to practice listening with the form in mind. Okay, so this is going to be a more active type of listening than, turning on your dinner time jazz playlist and just chilling. So when you practice hearing a jazz performance, there's a few ways to practice listening with the form. So the first one is to follow along with the lead sheet. So lead sheets are often found in a real book or a fake book, but also if you do a Google image search, if you go to images.google.com and you search, for instance, for a beautiful love lead sheet, you will often find lead sheets for just about any jazz tune. So you could, for instance, get out this lead sheet for Beautiful Love and listen to Bill Evans's version and count along. And I remember doing this 20 years ago, 25 years ago, however old I was, and I would literally take my finger and I would pulse 4 beats for each measure to make sure that I could follow along. And if you're doing this, you're going to notice that each time you rotate to the next chorus, each time you get to the very end of the form, we call each time through the form a chorus, and then go back to the beginning, usually something's going to change in the music. What are some of these things that change? So it could be in the bass. The bass could go from a 2 feel to a 4 feel, right? Half notes in a measure to quarter notes. The drums might go from playing with brushes to more sticks. Ting, 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 ting. And if you do this, if you listen to Bill Evans's version, you'll notice that his left hand style is going to change. So he plays the first 2 choruses of his solo with a freer left hand. And at the start of his 3rd chorus of solo, he goes to what we call a locked hand style, where he plays the left hand with each melody note. And it's much thicker. And then you'll notice that whenever soloists change, it should be happening right at the end and beginning of the form, right at the end of a chorus or the beginning of a new chorus. And that's a good way to check yourself. Are you actually following the form? If jazz musicians go to any kind of a performance, a concert, a club, anything, we're tracking that form in our head because that's kind of the game that's being played. Just like if you're going to a baseball game, maybe you know how many outs are in the inning, right? You're following how many innings. If you're at a basketball game, maybe you know which quarter you're in and where in the quarter it is and how many fouls each player has. Same with jazz. There's a structure to this that we want to follow and keep track of, and it makes it much more interesting. All right, so you definitely want to do some practice while listening. And so like I said, you could have the lead sheet in front of you. Or another way to do it is to sing the melody during the solos. So just like I was doing when I was soloing with my terrible A natural, which is too high for me. If you're just sitting at home listening, or if you're, you can sing out loud, or if you're at a concert or live performance, you sing that melody in your head. The melody is kind of going on somewhere in our subconsciouses. I don't know what the plural of that word is. Subconscious. It's always going on, like way in the back of our minds as jazz musicians. What is that melody? Because that's how, for me at least, that's the easiest way to remember the chords, is to associate them with the melody. So even if I'm playing, one part of my brain is thinking, but in my mind, I have a way better singing voice. Or you can follow along with the bass. This is a little bit more advanced, but really, really useful. It's really great to practice and know the bass lines. And I'm not talking about like a walking bass, boom, 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 boom. I would say just the root of the chord. Ba, bo, da, da, bo, do, do, bo, do, da. That bass provides the foundation for the harmony. And again, I can think about that and sing that while I'm actually playing my improvisation. Boom, That's really tough multitasking to actually sing it, but you could hear that in your head while you're playing, and that helps you keep oriented and interested. Not interested, oriented and in the right place. Now, here's something that's really key: is that if you're just looking at a piece like Beautiful Love or any other piece and you're just seeing a bunch of measures, you're looking at it wrong. Okay, jazz musicians, we see everything in 4 or even better 8 measure phrases. And therefore, keeping form actually becomes much easier because we're not thinking about 32 measures in a tune. We're thinking about however many 8 measure phrases or 4 measure phrases we have. So whenever you're practicing, for instance, improvisation or comping, I would really recommend that you practice in a way that highlights that structure. What do I mean? So instead of improvising just, okay, improvise however you want, I often have my students improvise for about 2 bars and then rest for about 2 bars. And that often imitates the phrasing of a melody, right? If we look at this melody, we can see that, there's about 2 bars of notes with a pickup, and then 2 bars of hold and another pickup. And then about 2 bars of note, 2 bars of hold plus a pickup. And then again, 2 bars of notes, 2 bars of hold, and then we have a pickup. So, this is a common and very useful phrasing model, and it will help to keep you organized. So that if I'm improvising, I'm thinking 2, 3, 4. Here I'm resting, right? Resting. Resting. And so then I'm not just thinking, oh, I'm in this flow and I'm not sure where I am. Here's my 4-bar phrase. I'm playing for this much, resting for this much, right? Makes a lot of sense. Same thing if you're comping. Maybe you want to come up with a comping plan where I'm doing 2 bars Charleston, 2 bars reverse Charleston. And then you're always keeping track. So you're going. And back to the 2 bars Charleston, 2 bars reverse Charleston. And I often have my students only hold their comps, everything's short except I'll have them hold the very last measure of an 8 measure phrase to keep track of it. So listen, I'm going to do the same thing. And by the way, I know this is a video for beginners. If you don't know what Charleston and reverse Charleston are, that's a great place to start comping, and that's all in this Jazz Piano Fundamentals book. So I'm comping. Here's where I reverse Charleston. Okay, so I'm putting in a little placeholder for myself at the end of each 8-bar phrase, and it's both helping me, but it's also good for the band, anybody else who's playing with me. And it's very musical because we want everybody to hear these 8 measure phrases. So that can be a nice way to remind yourself, okay, here's my 8 measures. Okay. So again, the moral of the story here is don't think about 32 separate measures. Think in 4 and 8 measure phrases. And then my last point I want to make about following the form is this just takes a lot of time and repetition on the instrument. And it can be good practicing a lot of times to stop when you make a mistake. But in terms of keeping the form, that is not good practicing. Practicing the form is a matter of practicing always continuing on. So there's 2 main ways I can think of making sure that you're doing this. The first one is to play with a band. Anything that you can do, the best thing that you could do in your jazz education, better than taking a class from me, or I dare say buying my books, is to play with live musicians a lot, as many hours as you can. Okay. Assuming that's not possible, 24 hours a day, the other thing to do is to use the iReal Pro app. Okay, highly, highly recommend that you spend time just playing with that iReal Pro app because you're going to get used to following the form. And you can put that iReal Pro app to, any tempo you want, any number of repetitions you want. You can even just repeat a short section. But playing without stopping and getting used to getting into the middle of the form and jumping in the middle, those things are really important in a band set. All right, so I know that was maybe a basic talk for a lot of you. Maybe for some of you that was brand new or newly interesting. If you're in that brand new category, I wrote this book, Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 1, for you. I wrote this for people with really no jazz experience, and it includes a lot of these things that are just a basic beginning guide to the jazz style. So those are available at jeremysiskind.com, also on other sites, Amazon, but I'll sign it for you if you buy it from me, and that's worth almost nothing. Thank you for watching. And since we're talking about form, why don't you tell me your favorite shape in the comments if you made it this far? Is it a square? Is it an octagon? Is it a triangle? Who can say? Only you. Thanks for watching.